So MVP kind of responded to the allegations that I made against them. I didn't really make them against them. It's not like they did something bad. We should probably change this to an MVP disc. Hex, Crave, Glick. Say a little plug for the Crave. But if you haven't seen a video I made a couple days ago, it was actually about how MVP is secretly selling discs for like $12 premium plastic on Amazon through another brand name called Remix Disc Sports. Now, this is something that was told to me by an Instagram page called Medina Disc Golf. And I've actually heard someone reach out to Foundation Disc Golf on their Patreon and ask them the same question about like what they think about Remix discs, because on Amazon you can buy premium plastic discs. Let me show you the disc actually. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And kind of interestingly, I actually have one of them in my fieldwork boxes right down here. I needed another one of these bags, and we'll get to the reason for that. But these discs here, like the Torpedo, Juggernaut, they're premium plastic in their sport plastic. And I actually have a new theory about something related to this sport plastic. These are all premium plastic discs for $12. The Behemoth is $13 because it's glow, and these two base plastic discs are $10. Now, when I shot this video, it was intriguing because essentially it felt like these discs, which are made by MVP, shows that MVP Disc Sports LLC is the owner of Disc Golf Goods, which is the Amazon storefront for Remix discs. But I wanted to see like what my guess as to what these discs were. But let's real quick focus on the Torpedo, because this mid-range might look very familiar, and I didn't want to believe it was true. I knew that someone had called it a Mustang, which I was like, okay, that's fine. The discs that I'm bagging for this season, more than like, are going to be Pathfinders. And we'll get to the comment from the person from MVP in 1 second, but these discs, unfortunately yesterday, I went and held these side by side and tried to guess which was which, and only because I know which one I put in my hand. I'm pretty sure this is Torpedo, yeah, and this is the Pathfinder. This one might have slightly more dome, but these discs are unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the same exact mold, like literally the same mold. And these ones are the same exact plastic, but this one is less than half the price of this one. Now this is where things get super interesting, because we're gonna head over to the YouTube video that I actually put together to like kind of challenge myself with those discs, because honestly it was a lot of fun to throw them. If we look at the comment that I actually pinned, it's got 35 likes now, but I'm pretty sure this is somebody from MVP, and this is what they had to say. So they say, your theory about being test or proto molds was so close, because that's ultimately what I came to, is I felt like these discs were very similar to the discs, but they felt a little bit off. Like this felt a little less stable than the Mustang, because the Mustang bills itself as a slightly overstable mid, maybe like 5502, which is interesting because it's probably the exact same disc. But I felt like they were like factory second molds that in their prototyping process, they were like, these are good enough, but not exactly what we want. Not the case for these companies, Thought Space and Mint, which is what I thought, actually the case for MVP. And this is where it gets crazy, because it says the molds were never prototypes for the leasing companies. This is important. Leasing companies being like probably the specific word for Mint, Jester Discs. It looks like a couple other companies actually that this person who commented this talks about in a second, to basically lease molds from MVP and then sell them under a private label name. But these molds were planned discs for MVP that didn't quite have the desired flight for MVP flagship brands, being MVP, Axiom, or Streamline, which is interesting because this disc we think is a Streamline Trace, the Spartan. So that wouldn't make a lot of sense. So maybe it's not a Trace, maybe it's like a Diamondback or something. Not 100% sure. The Torpedo was a prototype for what eventually became the Reactor, which is interesting. I have a Reactor here. Fission reactors for sale. I was gonna grab some from my last run because I had some glow ones, but we got fission reactors, so why would I do that? This was a prototype for what became the Reactor, and they are definitely similar. The Reactor is slightly more overstable, slightly more like flatter down here instead of rounded towards the bottom, but very similar bases actually, now that I look at it. And they said those that follow Mint will remember the Alpha went on a long hiatus. The original Alpha, which is a fairway driver, 8-speed, was not compatible with MVP's new production machines, so it got retired. The same reason that Amp and Shock were retired, which probably are MVP molds, among other molds. Unfortunately, to the consumer, it's much better PR and NDA compliance, because I think companies like Mint and maybe ThoughtSpace, and a lot of these companies probably have NDAs with MVP. It's better NDA compliance for Mint to say that the mold was retooled than sorry, MVP can no longer make it. And that mold, actually, we think, is the Ronin Mintus Alpha. I was calling it a 7-speed. 7 and 8 speeds feel so similar, but this is probably like 8, 4, 0, 2.5 or something like that, like a lot of people were saying. I was thinking it was a Votum because it was a lot more stable than a Grackle, but Alpha also makes sense. Overmold tech is not just about top and bottom like other brands. So if you take a mold like a Destroyer, you have the top part, which goes to this parting line, and then the bottom part. And the parting line is what a lot of people talk about, where it's higher or lower, kind of makes things more or less stable. What's interesting about top-bottom technology is if we take a Pharaoh, was able to find some Evelyn Pharaohs, I've heard that this has the top of a Destroyer and the bottom of a Shrike. So the tops might be the same, down to this parting line, but then the bottom is a Shrike. Not 100% sure if that's true or not, but a lot of companies are top and bottom, whereas MVP, they're gonna get to, is a little bit different. Multiple discs share the same core, Proxy and Envy, Signal and Relay, Pyro and Reactor, and so on. MVP can create a prototype of a rim, then attach it to a current core. The injection points where the overmold attaches are left in the open position to let polymer polymers flow to the edge like Streamline. That's interesting. I'm guessing that means like these injection points at the sides here. There's like an injection point right there that you might be able to barely see, where it looks like they pour into the overmold, but you can guess leave it in longer to make it basically fill up the whole disc instead of just the rim, not having the core. And then that's like what Streamline does. And if it doesn't work out, then they'll lease that rim configuration to another company like a Mint, a TSA. And because they can just leave those on the open position so they don't like stop once it gets to this part, they'll like fill the whole disc, I guess. None of these leased discs share an overmold with flagship discs, so the wing is all different, only with each other. This is why none of the Remix, TSA, or Mint molds have embossing on the underside like the flagship brands, because this is inside of the mold. He's gonna call it in a second convex embossing, where you can see Axiom discs and run your finger over it, and it's not into the mold, as well as it says PG approved right here, and none of these discs have that. But all MVP, Axiom, and do Streamline? I don't think I have any Streamline discs to check, but all those discs do have it. Maybe Streamline isn't technically a flagship brand. That would make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. And then he says that TSA has some putters with embossing, but those are not manufactured by MVP. Also, so crazy that this person would be willing to drop this comment. Like, this is so much good information. So, why is Remix a thing? Production time and material shelf life, which is something that I talked about a little bit, made a lot of sense. The raw polymers, or the plastics, can only sit so long to remain viable. MVP cannot waste machine time to produce 2,000 discs when a leasing company calls. I mean that, like, they can't just throw on that mold, and if, like, let's just say ThoughtSpace wanted more Pathfinders to do another run of Pathfinders. They can't just call up MVP and be like, hey, we need 2,000 Pathies. So instead, what MVP does is, if there's an excess of raw material, overruns can be made. Minor example, MVP produces 10,000 torpedoes in different plastic, plasma, neutron, and proton, which this would be the proton plastic. I guess this would probably be neutron. And then the plasma is kind of like what this is, which we think is a profit for Mint discs, the Juggernaut. And if TSA doesn't need any aura, but does need ethereal, they'll pick up the plasma and have them stamp Pathfinder. The neutron is just aura. The proton is just, this is nuts. So Mint, on the other hand, doesn't need any Apex, but does need Eternal and Sublime, but the plasma is already sold to TSA, so they take the proton and stamp it Mustang. So this just takes a different stamp and turns into a Mustang. Same exact disc. And if there are any overruns from that, the neutron or whatever, or if they don't buy all of those, it's sold on Amazon as Remix Torpedo. This is why you rarely see any of the companies restock all their plastics at the same time, and why there's such long runs or periods between runs. So like, you're not gonna see an ethereal Pathfinder, which is just the plasma plastic, this stuff, along with an ethereal Mustang, but you might see Proton Mustangs, or they call them Apex, what do they call them? Eternal and Sublime, I guess. This is kind of nuts how this all works, which I know a lot of insiders know, but this is not something that I knew 100%, and if I didn't know it, and like I spent all my time doing this, I'm sure a lot of you guys don't understand this as well, or like haven't known about it, which is nuts. And so why Amazon, which does make a ton of sense, logistics, packaging, shipping, website, ordering, returns. And this is why when we initially looked at it, this is actually what I used to do a little bit for my living, but you can see here that it ships from Amazon, this Remix Disc Eldritch, and is sold by Disc Golf Goods. And the way that that works is when you sell on Amazon, you can actually, they can just take the 500 to 1,000 of these, pack them into one box, and ship it into an Amazon warehouse, and Amazon will end up fulfilling them, doing customer returns, dealing with all the payment processing and everything, and they just have to sit on Amazon and they'll sell there. So that's kind of how that works with all these, and that's why they do it on Amazon, because logistics is just so much better than having to deal with it yourself. Believe me, having to worry about shipping all these out, I like it a lot more, because profit is much better, like I get to keep a lot more money, but even with this, actually let me see if I still have access to any of my Amazon tools to see if I can pull this. Let me grab the Amazon number right down here, B, right there, ASIN. So we can actually see how much they're making per unit. So we can see here, perfect. This is gonna give us a lot of information, which is kind of neat. So we can see that on this $13 or $12 item, the Remix Eldritch, which is just their putter here, Amazon's fees are $2.78. Fulfillment cost is $3.40. Storage cost is 3 cents, and that's like assuming that it's going to stay there for 3 months. So storage fees can go up. So it looks like Amazon is going to charge $6.21 on their end, meaning that the net profit, or the net revenue in this case for Amazon, is $5.74 per disc. If the plastic only costs them $2 to make, they're making $3.74 just by having this sell at Amazon in a 3-month time period. So pretty interesting to see, and that was pretty much right on actually, because I said they'd make $4 to $7 and they make $6. Or maybe they just want more useful life than what Mint and ThoughtSpace are giving them in terms of orders. Like maybe Mint and ThoughtSpace aren't selling as much as MVP wants them to. I used to sell on Amazon. The money that they're making on these discs is very minuscule. Maybe 40 to 60% of whatever is sold on Amazon is Amazon's fees and such. MVP might be grossing $4 to $7 of revenue, which is not a lot at all. Selling to a consumer cheap on Amazon yields nearly the same profit as selling a couple thousand of a mold to a leasing company, which is, now we can know how much a couple thousand is. So if they're making $3 a unit on that after shipping and polymers, they're probably making $3 of profit by selling them to a leasing leasing company. So if wholesale for, it just gives you a lot of information, because if wholesale for Thought Space Athletics to a dealer is like, let's just say $12, then that probably means that they're making $3 or $4 on top of that. MVP is making $3 or $4 on top of that. So it probably costs $2 to $3 to make, and then $6 to sell to Thought Space, and then $10 to sell to a wholesaler, and then $20 retail. Very speculative, but so probably close to numbers. So this is interesting as well. He said, video idea. I think we'd all love to see a comparison video of the Torpedo and all its variations. Torpedo, Mustang, Pathfinder, Addicts Reborn, which is a wild disc, which I also reviewed. The Harmony, which is a disc that I think is going to come out too. Harmony from Essential Disc. So this is another company that if you look through Essential Discs, looks like they have a bunch of molds that are going to be coming out. They mostly got approved here, February 2nd, 2023. And I'm guessing it's going to be a very similar situation where they have like 6 molds and there are 7 remix discs. So I'm sure they're just taking a lot of these and restamping them. Just kind of crazy that if I want backup Pathfinders, I can just buy Torpedoes. And legitimately, this is in my bag for my fieldwork because it's just another Pathfinder. And like I can buy Mustang if I want to, if I want like a cool Mustang, and they're all the same. Nuts. So brand and visual bias are real. Totally agree. People will swear the molds are not the same because of a 0.1 centimeter variance on PDGA specifications, which makes sense. And I think PDGA measures all these and they might get those 0.1 centimeters off because the measurement for this disc compared to the Mustang, compared to the Pathfinder, I do think has those like 0.1 centimeter variances, even though it's literally coming out of the same mold, coming from MVP's mouth. And I have an idea of who this person is. So spoiler, the PDGA does not care and nothing will change unless molds are required to have convex embossing, which is what we showed you earlier on that Crave where it showed axiom, meaning that it's going out, not concave embossing because it can be faked with hot stamps, which is what now you can look and see. They actually have the weights on the inside right here where they just took a hot stamp and didn't put any foil in it. Until this happens, arguing that the Pathfinder and the Mustang are not the same is as arbitrary as calling all Destroyers the same because Innova has multiple Destroyer molds, which is why they are wildly inconsistent. But yeah, MVP responded to my video essentially about remix discs and these 7 discs, and like they're just cheap replacements. I would prefer to throw Pathfinder because this art is incredible and I love throwing discs that look sick. So this little Pathfinder here in this Aura is sweet. I also think, this is my other theory real fast, on Amazon you can only choose sport plastic, which they say is premium plastic. But when these plastics came, this is in Proton, this is in Plasma. All of these were in Proton, so I'm not sure if those are the only obviously it could be Neutron as well, which would be much more like this Aura. This is just a Neutron disc right here. But I'm guessing that if you want to be able to choose the specific plastic, like Proton versus Plasma, whatever, there's no choice to do that. It's just sport plastic or base plastic, which is what these are in. And this plastic here also feels different to the Eldritch. This feels much more like an electronish plastic, and this feels much more like Nerve plastic from TSA, which I'm not the biggest fan of personally. Glow, I think you can count on as Glow, but that's where I'm guessing you can't like choose a plastic because they're all just gonna be fulfilled by Amazon, and like maybe all the Juggernauts are Plasma and maybe all of these are Proton, but maybe some are Proton and some are Neutron. I don't know, it's just, I'm speculating, you know? But that's what you gotta do, and then you get people who are more than likely MVP to respond to you, because I responded to say, this is super interesting, makes so much sense, how do you know all this, haha. And then the guy never responded. He actually, kind of interesting, if you take a look at his channel, no video, joined April 19th, like 2 days before I posted that video. Hey, that's actually wrong and wouldn't make a lot of sense anyways. That's actually the day that I posted that video, which makes a lot more sense as to why it was the guy. Or maybe it was the day. It was like right around that time, which is kind of nuts. And eyeballs here. And then this, Josiah Pancoast said, I'm pretty sure this is Chad at MVP. His nickname has always been Botter. I don't quite understand what that means, but if we look up Chad at MVP, Chad MVP Disc Sports, Chad Richardson is the, come on, engineering and design person at MVP. Could be Chad. I don't know. I don't know why VODR is a nickname for him, but really cool that MVP probably responded. Everything here makes so much sense, and it definitely like just shows to my bias that like I thought that those were slightly different molds. I mean, the Eldritch is just a Bullet, which is just a Yesterday's Love. And the Pathfinder is just a Mustang, which is just an Addicts Reborn, which is just a Peace Train, which is just a Torpedo. Like, oh, this is nuts. If you want to watch that first video, we actually throw all these discs to see how they fly. Check that out right down there. Chad, if that was you, hopefully you comment again and confirm. MVP, if you want to clear anything up that I said, go ahead and leave a comment and I'll pin it. But kind of nuts. Thank you for sharing all that information in a YouTube comment and putting it all in the public. It makes a lot of sense. It feels crazy, but I mean, branding is important. You see this all over the rest of the world, and I don't think it's wrong for it to be happening in disc golf. I just think it might be a way that disc golf is maybe kind of catching up, I guess you could say. But I mean, it's great for MVP, and this is probably where a lot of their money to pay Simon comes from, especially because it seems like there are new brands like Essential Discs and Jester, which are just partnering with MVP. And not all discs from TSA or Mint or whatever are MVP discs. Some are manufactured elsewhere. I'm sure they have a lot of NDAs. I don't think that's breaking an NDA, obviously. That would be a crazy thing to do just for a YouTube comment, but thank you guys for watching the video. Subscribe to my channel if you want. Normally they're not like sit down and investigation style, but if there's a response like this that happens, I want to tell you guys about it because this is crazy. That's that. Okay, love you guys. Bye. Gotta finish watching Champions Cup.